Hi everyone. Today I'm talking to Loong Wang from Ren Protocol. He's the CTO at Ren Project. And congrats on the recent mainnet launch just last week. But you've been around for some time. Would you like to tell us about the background of Ren and how you got involved in the project?
Yeah, sure. So my co-founder Ty, the CEO, we started Ren back in late 2017, and we launched a crowd sale in early 2018. And we kind of been building sort of decentralized financial infrastructure for a little while. And after about a year and launching a few products, we realized that interoperability was really blocking a lot of interesting applications from being viable. Specifically, we were looking into dark pools at that time, which require very high liquid assets, which you just didn't have access to on Ethereum. Bitcoin being the really obvious big market cap asset. So we pivoted our focus and began digging into the interoperability space. And we spent the next year and a little bit working on that. And we recently launched our decentralized interoperability solution called Ren VM, which allows people to bring Bitcoin, Zcash, Bitcoin Cash to Ethereum and use it there and then bring it back out later. And soon we'll be able to support any chain, any asset, and any type of application as well.
Wow, that's really amazing. So I guess for myself, I think one of the really appealing things in Ethereum and in DeFi is the composability. You have all these different blocks, and now you're bringing these assets onto Ethereum. Tell us how you do that. How do you bring Bitcoin to Ethereum, for example?
So at the core, there's a decentralized custodian. So you send your Bitcoin to this custodian and it locks that Bitcoin up on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then it gives you the authority to mint yourself an ERC20 representation of that Bitcoin on Ethereum, which we call Ren Bitcoin. And then it acts like any normal ERC20. And when you're done with it and you want the underlying Bitcoin back, you can burn that Ren Bitcoin and get back the amount of Bitcoin that you burned. And so, and you can do this in a completely fluid fashion. So you can sort of mint any amount of Bitcoin at any time. And then it's completely fungible. So you can take that and you can send a little bit of it over here and a little bit of it over there, and you can send it to somebody else. And then that somebody else might burn that Ren Bitcoin and turn it back into real Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain again. This obviously allows new assets to be accessed across chain, and sort of that's great for DeFi. You're increasing liquidity, you're increasing access to diverse assets, but it really does hook into this composability thing that you mentioned, where in the future when we can support more chains than just Ethereum, you'll actually be able to compose applications together, even if those applications aren't on the same blockchain.
Oh wow! I have to think that through. That's another level of composability between the different blockchains, I guess.
Well, one of the things that you can do with RenVM when you send Bitcoin to Ethereum is it's not just a sort of dumb minting and burning process. You can actually attach an intent with that Bitcoin. So you say, I'm sending this Bitcoin to Ethereum, but with the intent that it's going to get put into Uniswap, or with the intent that it's going to be locked up into MakerDAO or be lent out on Aave. And that's kind of what drives this composability. So you could imagine that you would send Bitcoin to a DeFi application, and that would then prompt maybe Zcash to get burned and sent over to Polkadot, where it would then enter another application, and so on and so forth. And you could sort of cascade all of these cross-chain interactions together.
Wow! So with one click from Bitcoin, you can sort of go straight into Aave lending market and start earning an interest rate on your Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right. So we've designed the whole user experience to be one transaction from the perspective of the user, because that's kind of that's the user experience that people are already kind of used to with interacting with Ethereum or interacting with the blockchain, is that they just kind of have to submit one transaction and you can compose all of these things together. And it's not going to be usable if you're interacting with a dozen chains and you have to make a dozen transactions. That's just going to get painful.
Right. I was playing around with it last week after you launched. One thing that strikes you after you've been in the Ethereum playground for a while is that you have to wait a while for the Bitcoin transaction to confirm. I think you use 6 confirmations. That's an hour or something like that.
So one of the solutions we're actually looking at there is called what we call confirmationless solution. And basically, what this is all about is that if you're someone that already has Ren Bitcoin, and you're watching someone else trying to mint Ren Bitcoin, and they're waiting for confirmations, you can essentially give them a short-term loan where you can front them the Ren Bitcoin that you already have, so they can use it straight away. And you actually give them a little bit less. So maybe you're trying to mint 1 Bitcoin, and I'll loan you, 0.9999 Bitcoin. And then when the 1 Bitcoin eventually comes through, that'll get paid back to me. And so I make a small fee for the risk that I'm taking on, and the capital allocation that I've had to do. And so there's actually a team working on this that's separate to the Ren VM team. And we hope to see other teams sort of pop up as well to try their own ideas around how to implement confirmation lists. But this is one of the cool things that you can do when you have, an interoperability solution like Ren VM that's really built to be composable from the ground up.
I guess when we have a lot of Ren B2C minted already, then you can just buy Ren B2C on Uniswap or something. You don't actually have to mint it yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's also another option. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, you're bringing obviously Bitcoin and other assets to Ethereum, and you mentioned Polkadot. What implications do you think that has for the native currencies of these blockchains? I mean, could Bitcoin become a reserve currency on DeFi and on other blockchains? And what does that mean for the value of ETH used in DeFi?
I think in the long term, what it will mean is that assets can find their true value. So one of the things that's kind of one of the implications of not having interoperability is that assets and applications can have value solely because they're hooked into a particular ecosystem. So, maybe it's not the best solution, or maybe this asset doesn't have intrinsic value, but because it's the only option that you have, okay, then it has value because, there's necessary demand. But once you unlock all of that and you have true interoperability, then maybe Bitcoin will take its place as, the default collateral in all of DeFi. And then other forms of collateral won't be necessary because you have access to the biggest and most traded one. So I think that what we will see long term is that different tokens and different assets will be able to see, some more of a true usage in what they're really meant to be. But I will think we'll also see an expansion. Like this will be the first time that you're able to, without trust or without a centralized third party, earn interest on your Bitcoin. And I think that's huge. So I think certainly in the short term, we'll just see an expansion of the need or the desire for different assets, because people who have them and are holding them can continue to hold them, but instead also an interest.
Yeah, no, that's really, I think, a breakthrough in computer science that you, for the first time, really can earn interest in a trustless way on Bitcoin. I mean, you had WBTC that you could lend out on lending markets before, but Ren B2C, I think, is another level of being trustless in this space. So I think that's really a breakthrough.
Yeah, and we're also building. We actually have a bridge between WBTC and Ren BTC. So if you want to access the markets that WBTC is already hooked into, you can actually go through the Ren VM machine and get WBTC in exchange for real BTC without a trusted intermediary, which is not a sort of a user flow that exists currently. So right now, if you want to go from Bitcoin to WBitcoin or vice versa, you kind of have to go through a market maker of some kind who's willing to make that trade. And, that has to go through a centralized exchange of some kind because there is no decentralized support for Bitcoin. But now that there is, you can actually go directly from Bitcoin into WBTC without having to go through a centralized intermediary. So if you really do love WBTC or you don't, but you want access to the markets that it's in, you can do that now as well.
You mentioned integrations a few times. What kind of integrations do you have in place at the moment, and what are you hoping for? I know Maker is adding more collateral types, and probably we'll see Bitcoin as a collateral for Maker. What other type of integrations are you looking for? And I know you're doing some hackathons as well, teams building integrations. So what are you excited about?
I think I'm particularly excited to see Ren BTC bridge itself into other forms of Bitcoin, because I think really what Ren BTC is really, really good at is providing this user experience. It supports any amount. You can do it at any time. you can do it with just a single Bitcoin transaction, and you never have to actually interact with Ethereum. It's gasless, it's confirmationless, and this is quite a superior user experience. And I think it's actually a good sign for the ecosystem that we have a lot of different forms of BTC existing on Ethereum. So I do see Ren BTC taking, I'm really excited to see it take its place as kind of a conduit between all of these different forms of BTC. And so people can pick their favorite, whichever that happens to be, because this is really what decentralization is all about. In my eyes, it's about choice, people being able to be self-sovereign over what they want to do. And I wouldn't necessarily want to see Ren BTC be the only form of Bitcoin on other blockchains, because that's not giving users choice. Maybe they don't like our model, in which case they just want to go through it temporarily to get to some other model that they do like.
Right, so it becomes sort of a free market for Bitcoin.
Yeah. But I think in the near future, integrations like Curve Finance, I'm particularly excited about, because it does do this sort of like one-to-one stable pools. We'll be running liquidity incentive programs across various markets. I'm of course excited to see any form of lending market come up. I think in our hackathon we saw an integration with Aave. We also saw integrations with Tornado Cash in our hackathon, and so these are some pretty interesting use cases that bring a lot of much needed features to Bitcoin.
Fantastic. And you can participate in the network itself as well. You have these dark nodes that secure the network. Can you tell us about how you can participate?
Yeah, sure.
If it's live today and open to the public?
So it is live today and it's open to the public. So obviously no network would be decentralized without the ability to participate in powering it. So if you have 100,000 Ren tokens, you can create a dark node, and dark nodes, they provide sort of CPU bandwidth, network bandwidth, storage bandwidth. They provide that to the network, and in compensation, they get a small cut of all of the assets that move between different chains. So if you get $100 million of Bitcoin moving through the chain from one chain to another, then 10 bips of that currently is taken and given to the dark nodes that are powering the network, and this is what provides them an incentive over time.
And is the Ren token that provides the collateral for the BTC that you issue? Is that right?
So the Ren token is used solely as a bond for the dark nodes, and so ideally you have the amount of collateral that's locked up inside Ren VM in the form of Bitcoin is less than the amount of Ren that's locked up inside by dark nodes, and this keeps the network well incentivized. There's more bond that could be slashed if nodes misbehave than funds that can be stolen, and Ren VM uses a series of economic drivers to ensure that this is always the case.
Right. So the Bitcoin, of course, is there to provide the collateral, but the Ren is there to provide incentives for the nodes to be honest.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. And is it hard to run a node in terms of hardware, or do you have third-party service providers to help people run nodes?
So we encourage everyone to run it on a VPS. So we support a number of VPSs, and we're continuing to add more over time, so that we can have it, as independent from various VPS providers as possible. It's relatively easy. I think a lot of our community members say that compared to other node operations, it's much easier. But we do encourage people to only participate if they're willing to play around with what is essentially a very young technology. So if you have a little bit of technical competence, that's ideal. But you don't need to be a programmer or a technical person to spin up a node and participate.
Fantastic. I think network participation is becoming more and more important, and you have your native token, so that's great that there is an income bearing asset in a way. What kind of income do you hope to generate on the network? I guess it depends on the volumes.
Yeah, it's completely dependent on the volume. So the amount of dark nodes we anticipate participating in the network is completely dependent on the amount of volume moving through, which is kind of exactly what you need. If you only have one Bitcoin moving back and forth every other day, then you don't need many dark nodes participating to keep the network secure, and you don't need Ren to have a particularly high value. If you're talking about having thousands of Bitcoin moving back and forth in the network every day, now you do need a lot of dark nodes participating, and you do need Ren to have a reasonably high value. So our economic drivers that exist can be adjusted to make sure that that's the case. But yeah, it's really going to depend on the adoption that we see over the coming years. This is not something that happens overnight. It takes a little while for people to become familiar and comfortable with the new technology, especially since nothing like RenVM has existed previously.
Yeah. If you look at the Ethereum network now, the gas fee is fairly high, and it's expensive to move tokens and do transactions on the Ethereum network. How confident are you in the scaling of Ethereum and gas costs and transaction fees coming down, or do you see potential for other networks like Polkadot that you mentioned, or other?
Yeah, I mean, I guess no surprise to learn that I'm a bit of a multi-chain kind of person. Our whole mission statement is about making sure that there's room for all sorts of different blockchains. I do think in the long term Ethereum will scale. I just think there are too many brilliant minds working on it for anything else to happen. I am confident that the Polkadot ecosystem has a really good shot at seeing a lot of developer adoption and capturing a lot of mind share, especially if we can bring interoperability to that space as well. Because then I think really one of the big challenges at the moment is even if Ethereum doesn't scale, Ethereum has all the users and it has all the applications and it has the current ecosystem and the grassroots. And that's really hard to unseat, possibly even impossible. And so once you have interoperability, then this doesn't matter so much, right? Because if you can access DAI, for example, off-chain on another network, or you can take out loans with dots or stable coins that exist in the Polkadot network, then this doesn't matter what network you choose to launch your application on. And you can finally pick the blockchain that is actually best suited to your technical needs. And I think this is kind of what I mean when I say that we'll see things take on their true value, because you won't see Ethereum getting used just because Ethereum is getting used and it's kind of this self-prophecy. You'll see blockchains getting used because they're the best blockchain for the job. And I do think in the long term, Ethereum has a really, really good shot at maintaining its seat as the sort of the king of decentralized applications. But I do think other blockchains will take a fair market share from that.
Yeah, for sure. Be really interesting to see how that plays out. So what are you most excited about, both in Ren, I guess, and what you have in the pipeline, and also more generally in the crypto space?
So I think in Ren, the things that I'm most excited for that are, I guess, coming in the near term would be supporting new blockchains. I think Bitcoin on Ethereum is something that everyone's talking about and something everyone wants to see. But I think the true value of interoperability comes when you support more than just that. You actually have application level chains being able to talk to each other, and that's coming this year. And I think I'm the most excited for that. Beyond that, I think I'm excited for some pretty normal things. I'm keen to see ETH 2.0 happen finally. I'm keen to see that begin, and I'm interested to see how that evolves in the space. I think we're going to see some pretty interesting clash of opinions and philosophies, and I'm very interested to see what that does to a blockchain that's got as much adoption as Ethereum does. And I was excited for the Polkadot launch, but now that's happened, so now I'm excited for Polkadot adoption.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for your time, Loong, and really exciting time ahead for Ren and for the DeFi space.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time as well.
Thank you.